This is AV Super Friends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV Super Friends. For September 18th, 2020, this is AV Super Friends Off the Rails. On today's show, we'll discuss dueling trade shows, doing the wrong things but for the right reasons, and we'll dig through the mailbag and answer your questions. So I'm joined by Justin, Larry, Mark, and Jamie. We're going to talk some general news here, just to kind of keep things topical. I did see there was a news story this week. I wanted to bounce this off you guys. It's something we've all been thinking about, as many events, if not all events, have been canceled this year due to unforeseen consequences. And so we got an announcement this week that ISE is back on for 2021. That sounds great, except they want to move ISE to later in the year. They were talking a springtime, possibly a fall, and they settled on early June. I'm wondering what everyone thinks about this. Now we have another trade show taking place in early June, and that's from Avixa. That's their Infocom show that we all know and love. So now we've got two trade shows about 2 weeks apart. And I'm curious what everyone thinks how that's going to happen. I guess they're not taking place at the same time, but then again, how do you deal with announcements and new products and training and all? If you got stuff back to back like that, that's tough. Now, granted, Avixa did come out and say, because they co-sponsor ISE as well as obviously the primary sponsor of Infocom, or that's their baby. They did say there's not a lot of crossover. They only see something like 5 or 10% of the people at ISE come from North America, which is Infocom's primary market, and Infocom has like less than 20% of people from outside the U.S. or outside North America, I guess. So there's not a huge amount of overlap there, but there's potential for some, and I'm just kind of wondering how that's going to play out. Are we going to get kind of some overlapping things, or are you going to have a company that's going to try to hold off and not announce something at one in order to announce it at the other? And how do you decide that? It's going to be weird. What do you think?
That's the part I think is interesting, is the announcements, because we're so accustomed to ISE kind of being that winter release, the not quite a full-fledged upgraded announcement time. And then we get the it's kind of like that sneak peek into what's coming at Infocom in the summer, and it'll be interesting to see what the companies do. Because I'm just tuning into the news. ISE, they want to do it 2 weeks ahead, 2 weeks behind Infocom.
Yeah, ISE is June. I didn't look at the date. Yeah, it's 1st through the 4th of June for ISE, and then it's June like 12th through the 20th or something, or 12th through the 19th or whatever. So there's about 8 to 10 days between the two. So basically it's 2 weeks apart with a full week in there.
You're going to have to really curtail your summer holiday in Barcelona. You're going to have to go there real quick and then get home to get to Infocom. I know you guys are all jet setters.
Well, you can just schedule your layover for that time.
I mean, how many higher ed folks do you all know that go to both? That's my question. Because I've never been to ISE.
Not very many, and I don't think next year in particular they're going to have a lot of higher ed people at either of them.
That's what I was thinking. With all the schools eliminating the travel budgets, these are going to be smaller higher ed shows anyway.
Yeah, if somebody's like presenting or really have some specific thing they need to go be a part of, I think you'll have smaller groups going then, but it won't be as widely attended as normal.
No, or they'll send one. They'll send like the designer or the manager or the person.
I think that same thing will happen in Infocom too. In Avixa, I think you're going to get smaller crowds just because of the travel bans and things like that from the universities.
And with the regards of the two shows, it'll be interesting in what the like the Japanese markets, the Asian manufacturers and things do. I think the domestic ones, we'll call them local, right? The U.S. ones or the European-based ones, they're going to announce it whichever one's nice for them. But it'll be interesting with the Asian, which is most of our industry, where they decide to announce and where they decide to go. Because do they have the budget to drop travel and booth space and demo and all of the people for both places in the same month? I mean, some of those people get there a month ahead of time. to start setting up.
There's pent up demand, but I think we mentioned it before, is that these next shows, when they actually happen, could be the most overproduced and underattended shows ever. They could be the best thing that nobody ever gets to see because they can't get there to actually see it.
Well, what do you think about the option of doing like a buy one, get one? Like, hey, you get a booth at ISE. 2 weeks later, we'll give you a booth at InfoCon. You got to get there, but hey, free booth or something. I don't know. I guess my concern would be if a manufacturer's got 8 or 10 things they really want to focus on, do they pick 4 at each, or do they do, I mean, how do you do that? Do you just make the same announcements a second time? At which point, Jamie, to your point, if you're just gathering the news and you're there and all of a sudden, well, I already know about all this stuff because I read about it 2 weeks ago. So, you know, yeah, you get to see it in person and ask more pointed questions maybe, but is it the same thing? Or, I mean, how do they do that?
Well, I guess my question to that is, does reading stuff online replace going to a show? Because it does for me. And I don't really go on the show floor a whole lot. I'm more interested in the educational part of InfoCon. So I think that depends on what you're wanting out of InfoCon or ISE either, right?
I agree, because when I hit the show floor, I'm looking for the cool and weird widgets and gadgets that we talk about all the time. But then I very pointedly go just to search out engineers and, you know, bash their brains in for whatever dumb thing they've decided to give us, or the salespeople decided to give us. I don't really go for the big grand announcements. I don't really care. Because I read about those and it's all vaporware for 3 or 4 months afterwards anyway. So it's not like, you know, it's going to affect me. And because I got to buy it in 2 weeks. Most of the time I go to InfoCom, I learn about the thing that I'm not going to get because it's now out of stock. And 2 weeks later, I'm out of budget.
And I think that's why I asked that question, because I'm thinking that's not why people are going to go. I believe that if you went to ISE, you would think about going or not. And if you didn't go to InfoCom, you just wouldn't go. But now you're determining, is it safe enough? Or better yet, are we even allowed to go as Americans to ISE? You know, so there's a lot of other variables there too that are going to come up.
Well, all that aside, I mean, the travel stuff aside, my guess is we'll see them become much more regionally focused. I mean, ISE obviously Integrated Systems Europe, and they are big in the European, the Middle East, and the African market, EMEA. But you know, and there are other trade shows around the world, so we may see that for a couple of years, that the trade shows become much more regionally focused than they have been in the past, or that's where they started. But I'm just wondering, generally, you know, your big manufacturers, your Sony, your Panasonics, your Crestrons, your Extrons, they're at all of them anyway. Well, Extron's not anymore, but
yeah, not so much Extron, but yeah,
they go across the street and do their own thing.
Yeah, they're not at the show, but they're next to the show,
next door to the show. I'm just kind of curious how that plays out, because, I mean, someone mentioned a minute ago, you kind of see this stuff in February, and then, you know, oftentimes companies will come out and say, we've got this sort of thing coming, and we'll have more for you later this year. And, you know, in 4 months, I'll see more about that. That's great. It's kind of a preview. And likewise, you see the same thing at InfoCom. They'll come out with something. They say, here's a prototype, or here's something we're working on. We'll see more in a few months. Then you get more at ISE. So they're kind of nicely separated. And if they're right back to back, you know, you get announcement fatigue. There's too much stuff coming out. Or do you get this drought where here's this glut of information and then nothing for 8 months sort of thing? So I'm just kind of curious how that's going to go. It'll be interesting.
I guess you're going to have a bunch of...
At InfoCom, the show, as Justin was saying, like the show floor, it's okay, but I don't go there for the product. I go there to talk to the people I haven't seen in a year, make sure those relationships are still good. And even if I already know about the product from ISE, that still has value to me to go and actually get in front of the people and keep those relationships.
Yeah, I think you'll see a bunch of actual virtual booths at all these shows, just how people are attending virtual. I think the manufacturers themselves will kind of phone this in, and then I don't think they're going to put tons of resources into it. They're going to kind of just do the same thing. They'll have equal opportunity and have the same presence online as they have there in a conference center, so to speak, and then okay, and they'll have a select group of folks there, maybe 1 or 2 engineers, but I think it'll kind of all be paired back just to kind of give the equal presence to online and in person.
Well, I, for one, miss all of the parties, right? I mean, that's the only reason I go. The nightly sausage fest.
I mean, if they do dump a ton of resources in this, there's always a chance, until we're through this pandemic, it's going to pop up and they're going to have to shift it all virtual anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that's why I think they'll plan for like a huge digital presence, and then if they can get extra, they will. But they're not going to stress over it.
Yeah,
I'm just going to put on my bunny suit. I'm going anyway. I don't care.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting topic. Interesting news of the week.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to pitch one more idea to you guys. What if they did them simultaneously, and you just set up one side of each show floor is a giant video wall, so you can see the other one, and
like a teleporter kind of thing.
I heard there's companies doing that kind of thing now, where you can have a camera and things on each side, and
yeah,
we just have like NAB, ISE, Avixa, NAM, all of it just in one shop.
And you can pipe
Just
the
wave
audio
at
from one to
everybody.
the other, and you don't actually try to collaborate with the other. You just do your show. So audio on top of each other. It'll be great.
Yeah, but I don't want to see anybody with just one booth. Like Yamaha better have 5 booths at this whole damn
I want
thing.
a booth at each trade show. That's right. And it better not be the same booth. They better redesign that one appropriately. So I'm going to go put gum on the bottom of the little countertop in the Yamaha booth. And if I see it at the other trade show, we know they're phoning it
You
in.
know, etch your initials in there.
All right. Well, yeah.
Cool.
I guess we'll see what happens. We've got about 9 months to figure that out, but we'll start to see more on that. It'll be kind of an interesting coming year to see how not just those 2 big trade shows, those are the 2 largest ones in the AV industry, but how other ones play out too. So mix of regional or online or whatever we'll go. So we'll see how that goes.
More to come.
So, all right. Well, so I don't have a whole lot of other news I want to talk about. I guess we'll leave it at that. I think that's reasonable for this. Let's take it to our kind of general topic. We mentioned during the intro that we're going to talk about sometimes we have to make some deliberate choices to do what we would consider to be the wrong thing. That is to say, I think doing things that we know are not best practice. They're not the best way to do something. We're probably violating some established industry standards, but we've got reasons for doing that. Mark, I know you had some thoughts on this, so I'll leave it to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've all, in the last 9-10 months had to pivot and do things a little bit differently from time to time. And to me, this is kind of that, you swallow your gut check and kind of say, okay, well, no, sir, I don't like this, but we're going to do it. And I'll kind of give an example of what we've done, some of our work we did over the summer, and I'll let everybody else kind of chime in on an example on their own. But for us, when we were moving out doing collaborative technology this past summer, in the midst of supply chain shortages and the like, in March and April, we needed to procure 300 some PTZ cameras on our campus. And at that point, everybody knows you couldn't get any kind of USB stuff. You couldn't get any kind of HDMI. You couldn't get any of those types of connector type anything. So we actually made the cognitive decision that, we're going to go SDI. We actually went SDI in all of our classrooms and ran SDI cable parallel with CAT for control and for streaming and things like that to all of our PTZ cameras. And at the time, we all looked at each other and like, I cannot believe we're actually going to do this and do
cable
it.
Person, your cable person. I need 70,000 feet of coax.
Yeah, so we actually ran 35 miles of coax cable. When we averaged it all out in all of our classrooms, we averaged like 150 feet or whatever it was every room.
Put in CCTV.
But the thing was, is like we could get those cameras, right? Manufacturers like, yeah, let's do it, right? I'll ship a truckload to you right now, but we got them when everybody else was kind of trying to figure out where they could get anything in that collaborative market. Nobody thought to go like the old school broadcast route because most people aren't comfortable with that type of engineering workflow. But it worked for us. And like I said, we did parallel that with CAT, so we did CAT 6 and also coax. But it worked great. It was super easy. It was really fast. And we were able to deploy 311 rooms in, 12 weeks, whatever it was. But at the time, we kind of thought to ourselves, if this was a year ago, there's no way in hell we would be doing this. We'd be looking at each other like we're crazy. And back then, people would be like, why are you not doing HD-based T? Why aren't you just streaming it? Why are you, it all just would have been CAT, and it would have been extenders, and it would have been into our switching systems, but we didn't have that type of bandwidth, right? So, but I want to see, I'm sure you guys have examples, but so I just want to let's talk about it. Let's get into it. What did we do that any other time we would have said it was crazy, but during these moments, we're willing to actually deal with it?
Yeah, we had to do a real gut check. Well, I did, with just a couple of spaces. Most of it, my employer may have been a little behind on procuring a plan and money and an idea of how to move forward. So, but one of the things when it did come up was, oh, we have these conference facilities that are divisible, A, B, C, D, or A, D, the hotel conference room kind of spaces. And they're like, we're going to put classes in there. I said, what? Yeah, I mean, these are the ones with like the 20-foot decorative ceilings and the stupid chandeliers and all this other nonsense. And we thought, you're crazy. And they already had, input, output plates. And what we ended up kind of settling on, instead of just telling them they're out of their mind, was we made sure we purchased gear that, and just created this little podium of sorts that as soon as this is all done, we just take it somewhere else. We reuse it. We made sure that we engineered it in such a way that really you only had an audio out, an audio in, and an HDMI out. That's all that was actually plugs into the wall. And everything else is internal. And I'll be damned if, people have kind of been like, oh, well, this wasn't so bad. It's not something I ever wanted to do. Put some kind of classroom podium in a divisible space. The programming in it is already a nightmare, right? To do all the room combines and uncombines and all that nonsense. It's actually working out well. And there's some of the few spaces where we have more than 50 or 60 kids that can sit in the room in socially distanced areas. Still don't like it, but it's working.
You're gonna live with it. The old adage, don't do once what you're not willing to do a million times. You guys are gonna be known for divisible spaces.
Yeah, and so we made it work. And by God, it's going. And someday I'll tear it out and go, thank God this is done. But we did it.
Well, Mark, if it makes you feel better, we made the exact same decision about the HDSDI cables. It's what was available, so we ran with it too. So back in April when we were planning our
braggart.
Yeah, exactly. Well, wait. Back in April when we were planning, the video was kind of taken care of. The audio was going to be a mess, and so we went around the university, figured out room sizes, figured out noise floor, figured if we're going to have to mic the rooms anyway, let's take this as an opportunity to get everybody on the right page with what rooms need sound reinforcement, what rooms don't. And so we had a good plan put together. We ordered all the equipment, most of which didn't come in until the end of July anyway, but we ordered all the equipment, started rolling it out. Well, come late June, early July, we started getting anxious emails from faculty that they were concerned that they weren't going to be able to speak as loud wearing their masks. And so it took our standard voice reinforcement room from a 60-seat class down to about a 35-seat class. This was after we've already ordered our equipment, had most of it, had already shifted products twice just to get stuff to come in. And all of a sudden we have about 70 more rooms that we now have to add gooseneck mics and things for the instructor to be heard, and spaces that, are only going to be seating about 15 students at most. A lot of these rooms were our basic rooms. Those basic rooms, we were after quantity, not quality. And so some of those rooms had a webcam and had a dot cam. There was no good way of getting the gooseneck mic into the system. And so in a lot of those spaces now, I've got a sound reinforcement system and I've got a lecture capture system, and the two audio systems aren't the same. And that still bugs the crap out of me. I go back, I listen to recordings all the time, but ideally I want DSPs and I want all the mics to work together and play nice. And just because of timeline crunch, it didn't happen.
Yeah, we had to make a lot of decisions that we knew we couldn't adjust 300 some programs, and there was no way we were going to have the bandwidth to do that. So everything had to layer in as its own independent level, and just kind of no integration whatsoever. It's like it's just got to work by itself. And it was just kind of like, oh God, I can't see it. It's not on my network. What am I going to do? And it was just, I don't know. It was stressful to say the least. That's
funny. None of Justin's stuff showed up on the network either.
Yeah. Speaking of. So, this isn't really, I guess, COVID related. It sort of is. Our COVID solution was throwing in some doc cams in 300 classrooms with a built-in microphone. Now, what a story, right? So move forward. Have you all ever tried to design something using the least amount of boxes and lowering your cost? Because it's an opposite effect. I've been tracking metrics on this. So as my box count increases, my cost goes down. And so I'm graded on both, right? I have to get cheap design solutions as cheap as possible. And I use the word cheap there, but they have to be supportable. And we're talking about delivering the same experience to the end user and the students, right? So that's the constant. Box goes down, price goes up. Installation theoretically should also go down in time the less boxes you have. So there's this balance there that I'm always trying to fight with. We all don't have a lot of money these days comparatively to what we had before COVID. That's why we're all talking about mitigating here. And why do we mitigate? Time versus money, right? So I guess I'm challenging you all to think about that and try that sometime, because I'm wanting feedback. Because you sit there and look at a design, it's like, well, yeah, that's nice, but I can break that one box down into 2 or 3 boxes, add more power supplies. Now I've got more support long term, but it's cheaper for the client short term. That's difficult.
So why was the decision for lower the number of devices instead of lowering?
It's a support thing. So from ITIL, it's an IT thing. The less boxes you have, the less problems you're going to have later on. That's the theory. Most of us don't believe that, because if we're designing cheap, maybe it's less of a warranty on that box and it's going to die sooner. Therefore, it needs to be replaced sooner.
What's the pie chart? Cheap, fast, and good. Pick 2.
Right.
Yeah. I was just curious on who made that call, right?
Justin, it sounds like someone's reading like the Harvard Business Review and they bid into an article and they really like it, sort of thing.
I think they're just trying to make me actually think while I work.
Rachel, jump in, step on people.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to talk because I was so late. Hi guys, sorry I was so late.
You made it. You're here.
So here's what I want to know is, when you're talking about cost, are you factoring in your labor costs to so for installation and maintenance and cost of ownership?
Well,
I gotta believe that
stop there. We just you went
there's a story
on me, Rachel, and went total cost of ownership.
Can't do that.
You can't go logical here. So you had to stop at labor. And then you have to look at support in a completely different realm, if you will. It's difficult. Half the time I really don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not based upon what
I get what you're saying.
It's difficult.
Between I'm like I really don't like the idea of the all-in-one boxes, the all-in-one units, because when one thing goes wrong, then it's all gone wrong.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't like having all the little widgets either.
Like one cool thing,
this
middle ground.
Yeah, like this NDI stuff is going to help that out. One great thing that helped that out was bringing HD-based T's straight into a display or projector. You don't have an extra receive box. Those are good things that we're all like, yeah, that's great. That's less boxes. But when you're talking about, well, I can have one box that does all this stuff, or I can have 4 other boxes that are half the price that does the same thing. But now I've got 4 things to support instead of 1.
Yeah, I think it's a holistic conversation, right? It's kind of like designing for your support staff. Like the newest, greatest box can come out right now. It's going to do everything. But if your support staff can't connect to that and have never seen it before and it's totally foreign concept, it really does you no good because now it's binary. It either works or it doesn't, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? And
that's a balance.
Yeah, and so you got to kind of pick your sweet spot and say, okay, well, I know I have audio guys that really are good with audio, so I can compartmentalize this into one DSP. I have a video guy who's good with switching, so I can compartmentalize that into a video switcher. And
I've thought about that, Mark, and do we want to design around our current support staff? Because how long are they going to be there? And that's a question I've asked myself internally too. Is that even the right thing to do?
In higher ed, unless you're Chris, unless you're Chris in higher ed forever, nobody ever leaves.
Well, I think that's where you got to understand, like, be intentional. Like, where do you want your staff to be? If we all look at our staffs, like, it's a team, right? You have to literally draft your team accordingly. That you need to have your special teams group. You got to have your audio group. You got to have your video. You got to have your programming, and you got to know what are their capabilities. Just kind of going back to when I made these decisions about the camera and the SDI, we had a broadcast staff that were on campus, and they're like, yeah, I can run terminate SDI all day long. Just let's do it. And so we literally designed the systems based on the abilities of our staff, right? And so I think when we look at product and kind of what you have, it's anybody can announce the next big thing, but if it's totally foreign, all virtualized, and none of your staff have any skill sets to support it whatsoever, is it even the right fit for your organization?
And that goes back to another question of training. I think if you design higher end things, there's only so many older technologies that we can use these days, right?
Exactly.
So if you don't have a good training program with a track course that's laid out, that's where I'm starting to see some weirdness with that designing for your support staff kind of thing too.
Exactly. As quick as the industry's changing right now, if you don't have a staff that can learn and you're not constantly pushing them, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be in a bad spot.
So I'm curious so you're tracking this. How are you tracking this?
I've got Excel sheets. It's very, very dirty tracking.
Everything has to be counted on one hand. If he has more than this, it doesn't work.
I've got an Excel sheet per project, and tab 1 is one design, and tab 2 is the other design. And then on the left column, I have to total my boxes. And I flip back and forth. I'm like, oh, there's 9 more boxes over here, but it's $600 cheaper on and that's another thing, how much cheaper? Because if it's $5,000 cheaper, or is it $1,000 cheaper? Where does it become insignificant? And that's something that you have to have metrics for too. Because right now we're starting to gather these metrics, but then what do those metrics mean? And what's our target goal for said metrics, right?
I think it's interesting too that most of the time we talk about metrics and things, we talk about it to support our idea that we've succeeded, right? We've succeeded in what we've done. We want to validate what we've done. And you're going out about this, and I think this is great, and I do the same thing. This is why your idea is going to fail.
Yeah, I don't have an end game. I'm just tracking just to be curious about what the hell I'm doing. Price versus quantity of boxes versus support. And the support is this arbitrary thing that really doesn't have metrics, right?
Yeah. Well, I think building those metrics for those people, that's huge. Because if there's one thing that I ever do that I regret and then have to live with, it's acting like my own time or my staff's time isn't valuable, that there's not a cost associated to that. And then when I do that, that's what really stinks, because I find myself angry at the universe all the time, or I find my staff angry at me because I've put them in a position where I've saved pennies in order to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars of their time helping me save those pennies. It's not a good value equation. So you got to find a way to attach metrics to that, or else it'll look like you've succeeded when you haven't.
Yeah, I mean, we're really going about this. I don't have a succession end game finish line type thing going. It's collecting metrics because I'm getting, instruction, do it this way, design at low cost and as low boxes as possible. And those are very ambiguous statements. And I'm providing metrics back to those people telling me to do these things to say, okay, this is where we're going with this. what does this mean to you? And that's it.
Hey, Justin, does your support staff and your install staff, are those the same group?
No, we have a support staff that's mostly made up of, help desk, really service-oriented people that are starting to learn AV.
That explains it.
We've had one person drop out and we can't hire him back because of the hiring freeze. Yep. And then our engineering group is basically the failover for the support staff when things get above their head. So then we're pulling installers off to solve emergency problems, which just happened this week in a large auditorium. I was getting phone calls from the central scheduling person on campus flipping out about why our Christie projector was out for 2 years. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's a different story.
Yeah, but I think kind of going back to where you're at in your metrics, right? When we look at it, many of us just are very old school in our thinking. You get called, hey, we want to do a conference room. So we think the end goal is to build a conference room or build a classroom. And it's really, no, you got to dig deeper than that.
Why would you think that?
Right, exactly. So what is the actual mission, vision, and values of the organization? And what is it they are accomplishing by having a conference room or having a classroom, and dig into that? Because being able to provide that level of success, that's the true metrics. How much the projector's on, how much they're pressing what button. Yes, that is a metrics, but does that even speak to the success of their organization? Yes or no? And a lot of times those conversations never happen. It's either the architect just designed this space and they just pulled our standard off, and we don't even know if it's even going to meet the needs of the goal. What is the actual goal? And unearthing that's layers of onions, right?
We're building Zoom rooms, and 2 of the Zoom rooms we built this semester, have been used less than 4 times thus far. So, it's other Zoom rooms are just getting pounded. So those are important things to know.
I think it's I find this humorous, actually, because
I'm glad
it's not happening to you.
Well, no, I mean, I think about this and this problem you're having, right? Where you were told to do it this way.
It's not a problem. It's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's.
Well, that's the whole reason I can't get a raise around here, right? Because people come to me and they say, well, you're going to do it this way. And I say, that's a mistake. Well, you're going to do it this way. No, look, this is a stupid idea. No, you're going to do it this way. Fine. Here we go. And I keep track of it, and lo and behold, 2 years later, I'm also the same guy who sits down in the meeting and goes, look, I told you that was a dumbass idea. And they go, did you just do it and I told you so? I did. And I can't get a promotion around here. And it's the things just like what you're going through. You're like, hey, look, don't restrict me like this. Let me do my job. You hired me to make good decisions, fiscally, responsibly, supportively, and just trust me. And sometimes it's these kind of things, and that's what gives me humor, is like these are the kind of things where I'm not usually bashful about when I collect those metrics, to go back and say, look, 2 years ago, we blew $100,000 on this, and somebody in this room, me, was telling you that was an idiotic move, and you blew me off. And here we are. And that's probably why I'm going to be super fired someday.
So, Justin, you mentioned the challenge of trying to determine what equipment you're selecting and how the systems are designed based on the skill level of the staff who are going to be supporting it, and the need for specialized training or additional professional development to support those systems. I mean, so I'm curious, since we have an expert in program design on the call, I would turn to Rachel here and ask, what are your thoughts on trying to build a training or professional development regimen around a specific, single task or a limited task? Does that limit that outcome? Do you put a lot of energy into a very narrow field and maybe you're missing some larger opportunities, or, what's your thoughts there?
I think that you have to approach training design the same way you approach room design, that your first question should always be, what are you actually trying to do? And you train from there. You don't want to train around a specific set of tasks, because there may be a couple of different ways to accomplish an intent. And if you train around your options for accomplishing an intent, then that empowers the people who are supporting the system to help even when some component fails. And it also empowers the people who are using the system to teach in a way that's comfortable to them. But in asking this question, Chris, you did make me kind of think about you're talking about designing systems around the skill level of your support team and the skill set of your engineering team. Do you also find yourselves designing around the skill set and skill set instincts and preferences of your faculty? Like, if you're not having those conversations around what is the mission of the organization, what are we trying to accomplish, what goals are we forwarding, that help define what the real purpose of a room should be, aside from build a classroom, build a conference room, then that to me is how you end up with the Zoom room that only gets used 4 times. Am I blowing smoke here, guys?
Yeah. So no.
Yes, apparently you are.
Do we want to go through one of my designs that I'm talking about, or not?
I don't know how well that's going to come across.
I think we're way over time.
Yeah. So I mean, I think
the whole Zoom room thing is a whole show on its own. I really do. I love that discussion, but that's going to take us another 2 hours to blow through. So that's next time's topic of the week.
Mm-hmm. I've got it right here. I'm ready to pull the trigger on it whenever you guys tell me. No
that's the whole. Is conferencing even a thing?
Yeah. So getting back to our original premise of, like, are we sacrificing what we know to be the best practice in order to meet a need or to address a particular scenario? And are we comfortable with that in the short term and the long term sort of thing? And I think that's where I land anyway, is if it's something I need to do to make something happen for 3, 6, 9 months, but it's got a finite end, I know this is a temporary scenario, then yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, we're rolling out carts with a 65 or 75 inch monitor because that's a reasonable one that will fit through a doorway on a cart and someone can deal with. But I know that doesn't meet any sort of standards for farthest viewer or element size or any of that stuff. And I know it's terrible, but it is what it is, and we'll deal with it in the short term. And at least I think for the next probably 6 months, generally people are forgiving for stuff like that because they all recognize we're scrambling to kind of make stuff work. However, I do like, Mark's scenario of, well, I couldn't get the type of interconnect I wanted on this particular device, but I got a rough equivalent that can live there for 5 or 10 years, and it's not going to drastically affect the general, operation and standards of how this room is done. It will accomplish the same thing, and I don't feel like I'm stepping all over what I would like to do in a perfect world to make this happen. It's an extra cable, or it's a different type of termination, or whatever. But that that's something a little more acceptable. So I think it's a balancing act.
I think it's easier.
I think it's something that we're comfortable doing in the short term, but maybe not long term. So
yeah, and I think I agree with Jamie and Chris here, because kind of in the middle, I'll do whatever, I'll duct tape whatever. But the most important thing is I've got to set that expectation of what the end result is. Because if those people don't know what they're buying, then I didn't do my job. But as long as you know what the faults are, there it is. Kind of what you're saying, Chris. As long as everybody knows, hey, you're not going to be able to read an Excel sheet on the 75-inch mobile display, you're good. And
just about all of us also did a reasonable job of choosing products when we were shoehorning. We shoehorned products that can be easily reused into the appropriate setting when the time comes. I mean, 65-inch displays you can reuse wherever, right? The boxes that I put into my little podiums, I purposefully shoehorned in things that I would easily be able to transition to the right environment whenever that time came. But right now it's in the wrong environment, but it's working, right? And so did Mark, and so did Larry. So I think that was a very important part of I hate what I'm doing right now, but how do I stomach it a little bit more?
I think it was a massive disruptor, right? The whole thing was just this huge disruption, but there is good in that, right? We were able to move 311 of our classrooms like 5 years forward, right? Collaborative technology was on our 5 to 10 year plan. And then also the curriculum design followed it, right? So all of a sudden, boom, our technology and our instructors' ability are finally almost at the exact same point where we have actual very intentional curriculum in spaces that are capable of that curriculum, right? So it was a good disruption. And yeah, we had to make some kind of gut check decisions, but we've enabled it. And I'm hoping that this new ability kind of gets used way more than we ever would have thought it would have been used in the past. And actually that becomes now the new standard, right, of the capability of the room itself.
it's no
That's
longer
like Rob Emanuel says, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste.
That was our marching orders, right? Like, hey, we are not going to let this crisis go to waste. Like, we're going to get some money, we're going to do this, and we're going to move the entire university forward 5 years in 6 months.
And absolutely. And I think it's also not something that now we're trying to convince people that you really need to spend the money on these things because this is going to be a thing. It's going to happen. Like color TV, it's going to happen, right? We're no longer having to do that. Now it's kind of like, hey, look, you didn't waste your money. A year ago when we told you that you should do this and you did it, you didn't waste your money. And those people are now coming back and saying, thank God for future-proofing us, because we didn't think it was a future-proof until now, right? So it's been really interesting. Well, so Justin, how many boxes did you get down to? You got down to like 2 boxes, right?
One, just a computer.
Just one? Just a computer.
So it all goes. It all just goes back to just a computer.
It's just a laptop. Here you
Just
go.
a
One
computer.
box. Done.
So that's all it is.
Just a computer. Well, I'm gonna dump all over your idea, right? With our widget of the week, except we don't have a widget of the week. We have a Joe Way of the week.
Oh man!
Welcome to the call, Joe Way.
Amen.
How's it
We're
going?
live
Drop
and
into the
on
call
the
next.
air.
We have Rachel just drop in. And we got Joe Way just drop in.
Is this a public call or what?
No.
Hey,
Yeah, I put the password on Twitter. Did you guys
Yeah, we're
mind?
getting hacked, Chris. Can you do something about this?
Getting Zoom bombed.
Well, Joe, you just jumped into the live. Well, not live, but
Mark,
our.
you want to pause that or what?
No, wait. I want to pose the same question to Joe that we all just kind of pontificated on for the last 25 minutes, and the topic was, what did we do kind of over the last maybe 8 months in the midst of all this that we kind of said, man, I really don't like this, but I'm going to do it anyway because the time says we have to do this. And it could be anything. It could be a configuration. It can be product. It can be a choice of anything, that something you weren't happy that you had to either install or design or do, but you just did it.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Things that make you feel dirty. That's what the topic is. Yeah. Things that make you feel dirty.
Not in the way you're thinking.
Yeah. Oh. Well, all our minds went there. But no, here's the thing. I would say, let me say in 2 things. Because I'm not going to say, I got lucky because we already had our upgrade plan prior to COVID. But I will say that it's very cringeworthy when I see webcams strapped to the bottom of a projector. And then somehow it's looped around. And yes, I've seen those pictures go across Twitter. And just a basic $50 webcam thrown somewhere on a pole, and that's going to solve it. Because I look at what that mean when we know that in our I hate the term new normal, I hate it with a passion, but when we move forward and everybody wants hybrid to continue, what are you going to do? Just keep a webcam sitting in the middle of your room for forever?
Is that something you did then?
I didn't do it. Thankfully,
the question is, what did you do that made you feel dirty?
So what made you want to go home and have a stiff drink whenever you got done doing it?
You got to rat yourself out here. That's the question.
I made myself.
What we were talking about was kind of like the general topic was, we're knowingly doing things we know are not best practices. This display is too small, or this audio is not right, or I don't like extending HDMI like this. But we're doing it because we have extenuating circumstances, and we might be okay with it short term, or is that now a permanent solution because we know we're not going to get back into this particular space for 3 or 4 years?
Yeah. I would say for me, the thing that I did that I did not like to do. Wow.
Talk to us.
Yeah.
Here you are.
Click the link on my email. That was the one thing I shouldn't have done. No, I actually think about safety preparedness. And I think it comes down to not just equipment, but I'm really worried about our students and understanding there's no way to really take care of an 18 to 22-year-old demographic and make them follow the rules. So you sit there and think, we've done everything we can do, but the fact is they're not going to necessarily follow it. And you can do your distancing and you can put your signs up, but then I cringe when I see our stuff being used and I see, bad practices. We didn't have the right time to set up, proper, even teaching well, and how to focus on your teachers and the design and how they should be using the classrooms to be effective. It was a put it up and make it work, but it's not necessarily effective. So it's kind of that side. I really am worried about the students, and we see it in a lot of the schools that thought they would go online or go in person and have to flip to online. And no matter amount of preparing you can do, you're talking 18 to 22-year-olds.
Yeah, you can't.
And we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
Well, and you made an interesting comment there about like you're drastically lifting. Granted, you had it planned out earlier, but still, it happened in the last year and a half or so. You're drastically changing how these rooms operate, but the faculty are kind of coming in expecting the same sort of thing. So all of a sudden, they're presented very quickly. Hey, now I got to do things this way. So there is some interesting thoughts there. Is like, well, I know at least at IU where they were. Trying to do a lot with the e-learning group was trying to do a lot with the working with instructors and things, but until they come into a physical space and have to do things in a different manner than what they were doing 2 months ago, that's a big change, and we know that's not the way in a perfect world. That's not the way we'd like to approach a drastic technology lift across campus, but is what it is. So
yeah.
Well, that was good. So, let's actually take a minute. We'll take a break here, and then we'll come back and regroup on the other side of this. And stay tuned.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense. All right, back to the show, and it's time for our widget of the week, or as Chris likes to call it, the tchotchke of the month, or whatever we're doing for today. And it's something that's come up with Justin was talking about having all these little boxes that do everything. And then last week, we were talking about maybe portable units. And I have this little, it does everything, portable unit that I have grown to really like, and I recommend to a lot of people. It's from this company called Phoenix Audio. Now, there is 2 Phoenix Audios. One of them makes high-end recording gear. That's not the one we're talking about today. Makes nice gear, not what I'm talking about today. The other one is a smaller company that makes more of a USB and AEC and capable conferencing audio devices. They've broken off, and now they have STEM audio as well. But they have this little unit, the Duet. They have 2 different, used to have 3, now they have 2 different models of it on their webpage, and for sale. It usually runs a little over $100. I think right now they're getting a premium for, I don't know, because everybody needs a USB microphone. I've tried several of their products, and this one has by far been my most reliable. For $100, you get a speaker and a boundary mic with volume control buttons and push button mute on it. It's a single USB, uses no drivers, just connects to everything. I have thrown my kids' Chromebooks at it, my MacBooks at it, my Windows machines at it. I put it on managed machines and unmanaged machines. The stupid thing just works. It just works. And even in a room of about 15 or 20 people, it works. Not great, but it's better than the standard conference phone that they have out there. The Phoenix Audio Duet also is about the right size. It just drops into your laptop bag and you can carry it around with you. What we were doing with it before the virus stuff is we actually were telling instructors who were trying to dabble in online classes, buy one of these, just set it in front of you at your home office, and it does really well to pick you up and use it. I use it for most of my conference calls from home. So my widget of the week is the Phoenix Audio Duet system. It's a little over $100 usually online, and I would highly recommend it for most of your personal UC needs.
Perfect. I love it. It's at that price. You know, buy two.
A bargain at twice the price.
Right.
Wait, no. Why buy one when you can have two at twice the price?
There you go. That's government spending for you.
So Jamie, on that little doohickey there, it's got a mic speaker connection. What's
it's a widget, Justin, get it right.
Doohickey?
Yeah, you can use
in Kentucky.
Doohickey, it's a decade.
Ooh,
Oh man.
Big doohickey.
I like that.
Doohickey of the day, maybe.
So, on the model I have, it has a headphone jack. I think it has 3 poles on it, so you can put in a microphone too. So if you plug your headphones into it, you can still use it as the microphone, and then all the audio comes through the headphones.
And it's got an audio line in there.
speaker.
You can actually loop it off of a cell phone, right? That was the idea.
Yes, one of them does. You can. One of them has a handset. So if you had a standard telephone sitting there, you can plug your handset into it, and it becomes the speakerphone for your computer. So it's a handy device. And you know, like with most companies, I've had one for years, and they've updated it, they've changed it a little bit, but it's a pretty solid device.
Cool.
I think all of Phoenix Audio stuff is good. I think they've done a good niche in finding stuff that does do exactly that. You plug it in and it just works. The Duet is one of those things. I've actually had a few of them, and before I even really knew much about them as a company. And I think they've done the same thing when they split into STEM Audio and have really shown that they can kind of take that ecosystem and make it work. So I'm not surprised, and I think it's a good pick.
All right, I think that closes out our widget of the week. So I think it's now time for Mail Time.
I turn on my computer. I go online.
Welcome.
And my breath catches in my chest until I hear 3 little words.
Bills, bills, bills. Why do we keep getting bills mailed?
You've got mail.
All right, so our question comes from our Infocom presentation after party, where we had hundreds of people asking 2 or 3 questions, and we've dragged one out of there. But what we've been looking at is kind of what sort of things were hot on people's minds then, and is it still valid now? And I think the answer is yes. So this question is very generic in sense, but I think our recent times will inform our responses to this. So the question is, what are some of your long-term plans regarding classroom design? And will you be standardizing on automated or touchless classroom design? So I'll jump in on that first because I'm talking. My thought is, as far as long-term plans in general, I have a bit of an anecdote to share, I suppose. A couple of months prior to Corona, we were talking with the department about updating their kind of mixed teaching computer lab, and towards the very end of the meeting with some of the instructors and faculty, somebody kind of sheepishly asked, "Well, can we add video conferencing in this room?" And I said, "No, you don't get a choice." And he thought, "What? No, we don't get it." I said, "No, you don't get a choice. You're getting it. A classroom being designed in 2019 gets video conferencing, ceiling microphones, all the rest. I mean, that's just kind of where you go at this point, and then you dial back from there as necessary." I would say in 2020, everyone starts there and looks at the other stuff as kind of an afterthought. So it's kind of an interesting flip that instead of saying we're doing local presentation and maybe video conferencing, now we're doing video conferencing with maybe local presentation. There may only be 2 or 3 people in the room, and I've got 25 or 30 or 50 remote online students. So I think that's an interesting switch that we're seeing classroom design. As far as automated and touchless, that's, I think, and I'll speak for everybody, but I think that the jury is still out on that one. There's been a lot of improvements in the last couple of years. There's been a lot of different options of using your cell phone connected via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or something to drive the systems. But those, I personally, I'm a little reticent on doing that across the board, but I'm curious to hear what others think about that.
Yeah, I can kind of mirror Chris's comments there on both questions, actually. Jury's still out on the automated voice-activated classrooms. But as far as long-term plans, where Chris and I differ is we want to be where Chris is. So our biggest problem, in my view, is I'm part of IT, which is central to the university, but our budget is not centralized. So we don't have a way of standardizing classrooms. We might go to biology and they absolutely are just not paying for that microphone, and they're not paying for that camera. And there's nobody that can make them pay for that. It's their money. And that's the way the philosophy is right now. We're going to more of what they call a ramp model, which hopefully will be more of a centralized funding model. And IT and the AV group will have more of a stake in that and say, yes, you do need cameras and microphones in all these classrooms going forward because of various reasons. So I agree with Chris. We're on the road path to get there.
Yeah, I think for us right here, our provost basically said, okay, at this point in time, it's the standard. Collaboration technology is the standard, unless you can prove to me otherwise that you do not need it. So bake it into our standards. What once was an add alt, that package has just been baked in at boilerplate in all of our standard rooms at this point, right? Extra camera, extra microphones, it's there. The beauty is when we actually deployed it, is we reviewed our standards this year earlier, and just the cost of technology came down. So we actually absorbed this as a standard, and actually our base cost of classrooms didn't increase at all. Just kind of, it was right time and place when this all happened, and it became, part of our 5-year plan happened in 6 months. And here we are, 333 rooms that are now all standardized in that same approach. And until somebody says, okay, that doesn't make sense, or the metrics say we don't need to do it anymore, it's the default model right now, right? And then touchless, I think we'd like to get there. There's wholesale network conversations, I think, that are happening. Smarter networks. We've put down lots and lots of pavements and highways, but now we're looking at lines and dividers and on-ramps and off-ramps. And so we can actually do smarter things with our networks. And I think once that happens, we will actually be able to do some more of that automated approach. But I know we're optimistic on it. And as it happens, I think we'll try some things in certain spots. But I think jury's still out, but yeah, it's coming.
I will say that I was listening to CP Druitt, who is an architect working mostly in the luxury home space, but I think this is very relevant to what we're talking about today, talk earlier this week about the concept of integrating technology into spaces that are going to be occupied principally by lay people. And one of the things that he said was that he, as an architect, makes an effort to make the technology as physically visible as possible, because when you hide it, by making it totally automated or totally voice controlled, it becomes very intimidating to people who aren't using the space all the time. And especially in a context where you have different faculty moving through the same space constantly, I think you have to be aware of that the smarter a room is, the dumber it might make its occupants feel if they don't have a way to physically interact with it. So as important as it might be right now to kind of limit touch points with the system, you have to maintain an awareness of the comfort level of the user.
Yeah, and I mean, we've went so far as to eliminate some touch panels back to keypads, because you've got to meet the instructors where they're at. I need the system to work 100% of the time. As soon as that first day of class, the instructor has to say something 3 or 4 times to get the system to turn on. They've lost some of the authority with the class. And that's something like I can't cost the instructor that status because my system didn't recognize what they were saying.
You got one chance to get that right. It has to work the first time.
Exactly.
I can't do that right now, Dave.
So the touches thing, I like the idea. I can't trust it in a room where I have so many different stakeholders who the first time they'll be on campus is that day that they teach their first class that semester. So that's my...
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, this whole idea of the touchless, because, before we were all worried about germs. I mean, we were worried about them before, but now we're really worried about germs. Before that, it was kind of the whole Alexa thing, Siri, what's Google's? Hey, Google? They actually use their own name, don't they? Yeah, it's stupid. And remember, everybody kind of talked about it. I was like, well, and it was all brought up. And then all the things we just talked about of why, yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's not. But it is, but it's not. Maybe our clients aren't the right kind for that. And now, all of a sudden, it's back as, let's go touchless. It's like, well, hold on a second. We're still back to the beginning. And there is something to tactile. There is something to an actual doorknob. There is something to an actual even paper towels, right? In
Jamie,
the bathrooms.
Drive your car.
There's something to that,
right? Yeah. Take a left turn. Take a right turn. Stop. Like that's
Yeah.
Log into your computer.
I think it is that it goes back to that right size. And then we started off this whole conversation today about, did you overreact or did you appropriately react? Right. Mm-hmm. And I think going all the way to touchless it starts wading into that. I overreacted. I didn't appropriately react. That's how I was seeing that. As far as did we do anything different or what will I do in classrooms going forward? Kind of agree with Chris there is that I'll look at ways that we're going to start seeing trends in how instructors want to instruct virtually, and we start sprinkling those things. But years ago when we started to standardize the classrooms, we were already pushing heavy to DSPs with echo canceling. And we used a different tragedy for that. When we made those decisions, it was right after all the college shootings, right? And so we went to them and we said, hey, we want to do all these classrooms. We want 100 of these with these DSPs with a VoIP card in it. Oh my God, those are expensive. No, hold on. Wait a minute. You now have the ability to put a phone number in every one of these classrooms. And at the touch of a button, every one of those classrooms becomes a telephone and an emergency announcement. At the touch of a button from anywhere. Oh, okay, let's do that. Now it just so happened that DSP had USB, and we plug it in the computer, and now we're off and running with VC, and we've never hotted up the VoIP ever, right? Never did. But the whole premise is there's a use for this. Now, it was tragedies that there was these shootings everywhere, right? But one of the things that we as higher ed had to get over was how do you notify all these people? And we had microphones and we had speakers and we had all this stuff everywhere. Let's use them. If we're going to lock them in place, digital signage doesn't do us any good. If they're locked in a room, they can't see the sign. So let's overtake what they're listening to. And now we use this tragedy or situation. We'll use this situation to further our designs to start gearing towards online.
Yeah. I have a different take on the automated touchless. I think they need to go together, right? I think that they're just toppings on the pizza. They're not the end game, right? And so for us, we did turn all of our classrooms touchless. And you know what we found? The faculty members who decided to come on campus are the ones that really didn't care that they were touchless, right? Because they're already not afraid to come to campus. It's the ones who stayed away who were the ones that didn't want to touch anything and be around people, and so they didn't need it. So what we did is because all of our classrooms are now software. Basically we're very software based and cloud based in all of our designs now, and it is part of it to be integrated with UC systems moving forward. I think that has to be a directive, but also with the automation, what we recognized is that we took the voice control and turned it into a way the faculty think. It's not turn the system on, turn the system off. It's begin class and end class. So and we've tied that in to our scheduling system. So therefore, this room already knows who the faculty member is. It already knows that they're what class they're going to teach and what Zoom needs to get started. So as soon as they say start class, everything launches for them and puts them into there. Now the touchless has actually performed a service, right? And so it needs to not just be the fact that you don't touch it, but that it helps their actual methods of teaching and simplifies it for them. So I think they have to go hand in hand.
As far as what's going to be, how this has changed our design for the future, one things that I kind of took from our show last week and ran with and presented it to the powers that be here is this has allowed us to explore the way instructors want to teach. Like last week, we were talking about the semantics of it all, that we deployed high flex spaces, but those high flex spaces were largely lecture capture rooms and that type of thing. And that's going to be our standard going forward. We're going to have some rooms where we capture more of the room, less of the room, but it's still focused around the instructor giving a lesson. I presented to some of my supervisors that what we need to look at now is a program that brings the pedagogy, the facility space, and the technology together and design spaces with the technology necessary to meet the discussion-based classes. And we have technical support staff there on site that can make sure those classes go off without a hitch. And this environment that we're currently in has kind of opened up the door to that possibility. We're going to go ahead and put the systems in like we did this past year as our new standard. But it's also showing that's great, but there's this next step we really need to get to. And the only way to get there is to design an entire program around it.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.